What's up, everybody? We're back with another episode of V2 Sports. So, as you know, we are slowly approaching the college football season. And as I've kind of been noticing recently, the midweek episode updates are boring. There's nothing really going on. We'd be sharing the same news. So, starting today, going pretty much all the way to week one of college football, we will be doing team predictions. And this week's episode is South Carolina. So, of course, we've got the rest of the members of V2. We've got some new voices that you have definitely not heard before. And we're just going to try to make this a very fun environment. So, what does everybody think that South Carolina's ceiling is for this year?
I'd say around I'd say 8 or 9 wins. Because we all know South Carolina's a surprise team, and Shane Beamer can really push them over the edge if possible. But realistically, they're still going to lose to Clemson, Georgia, and they always lose to A&M every year. So
that's understandable.
I mean, realistically, ceiling is 9 wins. It's got some tough opponents, but they can definitely win a lot of games.
So, with that being their ceiling and everything, what do y'all think is going to be the most valuable asset to their team this year? You know, they've had a pretty heavy recruiting. They had a pretty heavy recruiting class for class of 22, and then it was all topped off by the transfer edition of Rattler. So, what do y'all think Rattler can bring to a Beamer coached offense?
consistency. I mean, not really true consistency. I mean, consistency playing. South Carolina hasn't had a quarterback that's lasted all season for 8 years. I mean, it's crazy how much quarterbacks either get injured or benched. I mean, this might be the 1 year South Carolina might have a consistent quarterback.
So, what is South
Carolina?
Carolina?
I mean, you look back at some other games too, especially against Vanderbilt, where they had to literally bench the guy in order for him not to throw over the game. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was the grad assistant that was, I guess, formerly on the roster or something like that, that came in and won them the game. So I mean, I would totally agree. The quarterback play was probably gonna be a huge upgrade this year for them.
Yeah, I went to a lot of different games for different SEC teams last year, so I went to that game. So yeah, it was the GA. I think Zeb Nolan.
Yeah, it sounds right. Yeah,
that is actually yes.
Yeah, I mean, South Carolina's got a more talented roster, I think, than their record has showed in the past years. And Beamer's a good coach. So kind of a quarterback like Spencer Rattler, who's still a little unproven, but he obviously has the talent, could really put them together and give them a pretty good team.
So
yeah, and I think if you can correct me if I'm wrong too, but is Marshawn Lattimore back from his ACL tear from last season?
Marshawn Lloyd, I think his name. Yeah, he is. I'm from what I've heard, he's fully healthy.
My legitimate question is: they picked up Spencer Rattler after
a
going out
5-star
and recruiting, the number 15 quarterback in the nation, and Tanner Bailey. What are their plans with him? Why would they go for?
I really liked Tanner Bailey as a prospect. I loved him when he was committed to Oregon, and Cristobal. And I really love him. He's a track star. I heard he's a really track guy, and he's a baseball guy, so he's got some speed to him. But he's also got a cannon. I love his film.
And I mean, you see, it's just recruit everybody that you can, and the best player is going to win the job. You're not going to not recruit a guy because you already have guys on your roster. You're going to continue to recruit the best players, and once you have the best players in your system, especially now with the transfer portal, guys are going to transfer out. So getting as many good players as you can into your system, that's what the good teams do. And then they battle it out for who plays.
Yeah. Going back to what Hunter said, Marshawn Lloyd, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. He's back from his ACL tear, and he was a former 5-star recruit. He chose between South Carolina and Georgia, and this might be his first year healthy.
So looking onto it, do y'all think that Beamer is building the program that many South Carolina fans have been wanting for the past decade?
Definitely. South Carolina fans have been wishing for this, under Muschamp. you could tell the program was in a downfall. They rarely went to games. The like numbers were low for attendance. It was a really all-time low for the state. And you could tell because even with Clemson getting better, there's more bandwagons over there. So you could really tell.
So one of the big things I love about Beamer is his ability to recruit. I'm looking at the 23 class right now, and they've got a borderline 5-star in Grayson Howard. When I tell y'all he is a hard-hitting linebacker, he can actually play a nice little hybrid position. He's definitely built for it. And just how would you pursue him away from his home state like Florida to come and play for South Carolina? Like, how would you even pursue him away from reigning national champions Georgia to let him come play at like South Carolina?
Yeah, and just if you look at Beamer, he's coached under a lot of really good coaches. He's been at Oklahoma. He's been at Georgia under Kirby Smart. He's been coaching for a really long time. So that really helps in his ability to go get recruits because he's learned from the best.
Yeah. And it helps with his recruiting and it kind of helps with his system. Like as a coach, it really helps because he's learned from all of them. So his coaching style is a mixture of like his father, Kirby, and Riley. It's kind of a mixture of all of those into a pro style, I think, is their offense.
All right, so we basically talked about the preseason. We've talked about what we expect. What do y'all think are some must-win games for Beamer in South Carolina this year to kind of like prove to the SEC and the rest of the world that it's not a fluke and that Beamer is actually the answer for South Carolina?
The first one that jumps out to me is Tennessee immediately because I feel like South Carolina and Tennessee are kind of at that point where they're battling for the second team in the East right now.
Like an
so that's a
race
big game
between those two teams.
I'd personally say Kentucky and Missouri. You have to end those streaks of losing to be successful. You've lost 7 out of the last 8 to Kentucky, and their roster gets worse, but you should be able to win that game. And then you lost the last 3 to Missouri. You have to win Missouri and Kentucky to have a successful season.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm looking at the Arkansas game. Week 2, man, if they get a win against Arkansas in Fayetteville this early in the season, I mean, that would probably just get like everybody's attention, in my opinion. I mean, that's got to be like the game
and
of
that
the year.
That would make Georgia, South Carolina like the game of that. They'd look at that as like a game of the year type candidate.
Yeah, they would
be
South Carolina be coming off a win at Arkansas. They'd be undefeated. Georgia be undefeated, and
playing at home for South Carolina.
At South Carolina, that would be a huge game. It kind of stinks that that's a noon game. Because both of those teams have a chance to be really good at that point in the season, but it should be a fun one either way.
And I've heard from a couple fans, Georgia and noon games, they always like are pretty bad compared to like night games and like 4:00 games. Especially like I'm pretty sure the last South Carolina win 2019, I'm pretty sure that was a
noon kickoff.
Yes, that was a noon kickoff. And Georgia, I think Georgia has transitioned, though, from a culture to where noon games could be a problem to a culture where they're going to be ready to play every game. Doesn't matter if it's at noon or not. And especially at South Carolina, the atmosphere at South Carolina is one of the most underrated in the country, in my opinion. And that's just going to be a huge game.
So before we even get into the schedule, anybody that like knows who South Carolina's playing this year, can we please look at this mean? Let's see. You have Kentucky, then you have an off week, then you have Texas A&M, Missouri, Vandy, Florida, Tennessee, and then Clemson. That's a mean stretch to run through.
Yeah.
Like even for any team running through that many SEC schools, even considering Vandy,
I think I think Beamer's like getting them to a point where you looking at a normal like person, like if you look at a guy like what's Missouri's head coach's name? If you look at Drinkwitz and you see that schedule, you're like, they're going like 0-6, 0-7 in that. But I think Beamer's changing this like system for South Carolina so much that you could possibly say they win like the majority of those or like slightly under. Like you could really like just see like Beamer's really changing the system for South. Like he's changing everything for South Carolina. The hope and the momentum is going to be in their favor in a lot of those games.
And I mean, that's just a SEC schedule for you. You know, a lot of teams in the SEC play really good teams week in and week out. And I think South Carolina is building to kind of away from what they've been doing in the past years. Because in past years, not under Beamer, they'd have looked at those and kind of crumpled under the pressure of those many good teams in a row. But I think Beamer is building a really solid foundation at South Carolina where they can go in, week out, knowing that they have a chance to win the game.
And I know.
Yeah, and I think too with like it was Spurrier days. Like you look at the kind of comparing what Beamer's trying to do now and what Steve Spurrier did. I mean, they have a really good. I mean, I think they have a really good defensive line. I mean, it's probably not top tier, but I think it's definitely one of the best in the SEC.
They got that guy.
It's just a
Georgia State. Like you remember that him in 2020, he was like the leading stacker.
exactly. That's what I'm saying. So like compared to Steve Spurrier, he had Jadeveon Clowney for his defensive line to make it happen, and he's got some weapons on the outside. He's got a very solid running back. You know, you got arguably like a Garcia type of quarterback that can make plays with his arm and legs. So I mean, I think this team is going to be pretty explosive from what we saw last season for sure.
But I mean, still at the end of the day, South Carolina is a step behind obviously they're behind A&M, Alabama, Georgia, teams like that. But I think Beamer is proving to the country that he can recruit. And once South Carolina starts winning more games, the atmospheres get better. The facilities are already really good. So I think Beamer is proving that he'll be able to get those recruits and build really talented rosters, because you can be a really good coach, but you still have to have talent.
All right, so real quick, we're going to go over the schedule. I want everybody to tell me if they think it's a win. I'm going to give y'all who the opponent is, where it's being played, and if there's any like extras going around like homecoming or senior night or anything like that. And y'all just tell me, and then afterwards we'll get to the 23 recruiting class. I know I discussed on it a little bit earlier because South Carolina is definitely making its way on that recruiting trail as well. But I'm going to go ahead and get it started off. The Georgia State Panthers, and it's in Columbia.
Win. Beamer has the hype. It's going to be a home crowd. I think that's definitely a win for South Carolina, even though it's against South Carolina's former head coach, Sean Elliott.
Right.
I think Sean Elliott surprises a lot of people. He should have beat Auburn last year. He's a really good coach. He gets bold teams almost every year. I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia State keeps it close, but I think South Carolina keeps the win pretty easily.
All right. Anybody else?
I don't expect it to be close. I expect it to be a pretty good win for them. I expect Spencer Rattler to have a good game.
Especially against like Georgia State. I know another SEC team in Tennessee a couple of years ago definitely underestimated them and lost the game. So now Georgia State's put everybody on notice. They know not to, overlook them, and that they're actually a team. They're on the come up, and that is very much, owed to Coach Elliott. So
yeah, but just look at the culture. South Carolina is not Auburn. It's not going to be that competitive a game, I don't think. It'll be one of those where Georgia State can play with them in the first half or so, but South Carolina will show they have the more talented team, and it's at home, and I think it'll be a pretty comfortable win for South Carolina.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think they'll be probably win this game by 2 touchdowns, to be honest with you.
All right, so let's go to week 2. It's Arkansas in Fayetteville.
So I would get some heat for this, but how South Carolina always upsets a team? Like the last 2 years, it's been Auburn. 3 years ago it was Georgia. They always take down a ranked team. Auburn was even ranked. I'm pretty sure they were ranked versus South Carolina last year, even though they were sucked. But they always take down ranked teams, even if it's away. They always have a team they're going to take down, and I think that's going to
be your hot take of the schedule. Is Arkansas?
Nope, not going to happen. It could happen.
No way.
I mean, it could happen. South Carolina is good enough at this point that they could beat Arkansas, but in Fayetteville, I just don't think it's going to happen. You look at two, former Georgia assistants in Pittman and Beamer, and I think that I've been talking about culture a lot, and I think Arkansas has that as well. And I just think Arkansas at home still is a step ahead of South Carolina.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
I mean,
gonna give it to
Jefferson
Arkansas for that
too.
week as well.
Bryce.
Yeah, I mean Jefferson is probably one of the most underrated SEC quarterbacks in the conference, in my opinion.
Jefferson. I think Jefferson's second best, but I think you got to look at it. The past 2-3 years, Arkansas has always lost a home game they shouldn't. Last year it was Auburn. The year before, I forgot who it was, but they always lose a home game they shouldn't. So that's why I'm predicting South Carolina. South Carolina will have the momentum, and I think they'll take them down.
Right.
I think it's close, like 31-28.
Ooh. All
Yeah,
right. So we're going to go ahead and lock that one in for later in the season. If you're a South Carolina fan, come back to this after week 2 and see if you got it right.
Woo pig.
All right. We're going to go ahead and go to week 3, Georgia in Columbia.
Oh, wow.
And it's a noon kickoff like we were discussing earlier. But here's my whole thing. Everybody says it's going to be a blowout. And I'm kind of on the table of the fact that, yes, Georgia did not have, the same starting lineup every game, and they substituted people. No, they lost way too much that it's going to be a legitimately maybe a 2-score game or a 2-score and a field goal game. But it's still going to be in Georgia's favor.
Georgia, pretty big. I understand that's not the same team as last year, and it's not going to be the same team. They're not going to be as good as last year. It's impossible to be as good as last year because they were the national champions. But with that being said, there's still a lot of 5 stars. There's still a lot of experience. They're still leaders. They still have Stetson Bennett. And I just think that Georgia is just far and away much better than any other team in the East. And I just don't see South Carolina. And let's not forget Spencer Rattler. The reason he's at South Carolina is because he couldn't start at Oklahoma. And I get that there was good quarterbacks and there was some other stuff going on there, but Spencer Rattler's not. I mean, you could say that he's South Carolina's savior, but he's not. He's going to be their starter. He's going to be good, but he's not all of that, in my opinion.
My prediction for the game is 28-17. I think South Carolina's defense improves. I think their offense will make it like a lot closer than it seems. That's why the reason why it was like 40-17 last year was because South Carolina's offense like couldn't get going. I think South Carolina's offense is going to have those drives where they go down the field like you not like the times where it was just a turnover left and right. I think it's going to be a really like decent game until like the 3rd and 4th quarter where Georgia comes away. And South Carolina is going to be pretty overrated, I think, after the Arkansas game. I think all the hype's going to be in Columbia. That'll probably be a game day or something. But I think South Carolina is going to be overrated, and it comes down 28-17 dogs.
And you look at a game like Arkansas last year, everybody was pouring it in. Arkansas is going to win. And something that Kirby Smart undoubtedly learned from Nick Saban was the rat poison. And I think Georgia fed off that against, Arkansas or Kentucky when they just blew them out. Obviously, those were at home. But I think, if South Carolina win or lose against Arkansas, but especially if they win, there's going to be a lot of momentum of wanting to pick South Carolina to win that game. And I think Georgia comes in really focused. Obviously, the atmosphere will be great. Hurts South Carolina that it's a noon game, to be honest, more than it hurts Georgia because it's at South Carolina.
Yeah.
But I just think, South Carolina will be ready to play, but so will Georgia.
I mean, it'll be a close game, I think. I think it's going to be I wouldn't necessarily say a one-possession game, but I don't think it's going to be a blowout like people say it is. Because, you could say the same thing about Spencer Rattler. To be honest, I'm not high on Stetson Bennett either. Because, Stetson Bennett can show when he's flustered. He has a hard time moving the ball. And so, for me, I feel like it's going to be at the line of scrimmage battle, which obviously I think Georgia is a little bit better at. So, in my opinion, I would take Georgia probably 28-20, something close like that. I don't think it'd be much of a blowout.
Didn't you just say it was not going to be a one-possession game, and then you proceeded to give a one-possession score?
Yeah, it's contradicting, but it's tough, dude. It's tough. You can say whatever you want about Spencer Rattler.
I see Georgia. I see it being a close game, throughout the first half, and then Georgia breaking away a little bit. South Carolina coming back, a late score or something, and it being, 14-point game or so.
All right, boys. Well, we definitely spent way too long discussing that Georgia game. So we're going to do these next two in a group of two, considering they are both teams to definitely overlook, because one is Charlotte, and that's in Columbia, and the other one is South Carolina State, and that's in Columbia. I'm going to go ahead and lock it in here. That is 2 wins
Yeah,
for me.
2 wins for sure.
Yeah, easily 2 wins.
I think they're both blowouts.
All right, so
Yeah.
we'll go to the next week. We have Kentucky in Lexington. Now, Kentucky, as much as people hate to say it, I feel that the program, or the entire athletic program in Lexington, has definitely shifted from them being a completely basketball school to them actually gaining some respect in football. They've definitely
Kentucky is consistently the most underrated team in the country, in my opinion.
I got to tell you guys something. They are overrated this year. Madly overrated this year.
Why you say that?
Listen to me.
Kentucky is never overrated. They never will
Watch.
be.
Listen. Most of their 10 wins last year were 1-possession games. Like almost every single game they won, it was barely. It's insane to say this, but they lost 3 of their big powered guys. C-Rod's probably out for 7 to 8 games. And I think they're going to finish 6-6 or 7-5. C-Rod's going to be out. C-Rod is the life of that offense. You cannot tell me otherwise. C-Rod is the entire key to that offense. He had 1,300 rushing yards for a season.
Levis?
I don't think Levis is even close to Rodriguez.
Levis is overrated. Let's just get that out of the way right now. People putting him in the top 10 of the NFL draft is just wild to me. He hasn't proven anything. He hasn't proven that he's that good, and he's just not that good.
Yeah. Also, they lost 2 of their top wide receivers. They gained 2 4-stars in recruiting, but once you have to rely on freshmen for wide receivers, it's really not that good. Yeah, unless the freshmen somehow ball out and prove me wrong, but it's really not that good.
With that being said, I think Kentucky is a smash mouth football program. That's how they play. And personally, this is the game I have circled of Spencer Rattler can't play great in every game. And I think in Lexington, this could be a game that can go either way. But I personally see Kentucky taking this game.
All right, boys. So we have some time constraints right now because we wanted to spend all of it on Georgia. So I'm going to go ahead and speed through here. Just everybody give me a quick answer, maybe a 2-sentence at maximum explanation for it. So I'll go ahead and start us off. The week after Kentucky, I have this one selected as an upset against South Carolina. I believe the bye week will win, just because it's South Carolina and somebody will get arrested during that week.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm just playing with y'all. The next week is Texas A&M in Columbia. This is actually what I have circled as my make or break game for South Carolina. If they can hold on against Texas A&M after the recruiting class they just had, oil money, they've definitely proved themselves. So how do y'all feel about that Texas A&M game? Because
I think if South Carolina somehow proves me wrong and wins that game, the entire hype is around Shane Beamer, because not even Spurrier nor Muschamp could even come close to beating A&M. Spurrier's the best coach in Carolina history.
I want to keep it short. Texas A&M is my SEC champs this season.
Oh, okay. Well,
You're insane.
Texas A&M has really good freshmen. Those aren't going to be really good. Texas A&M is going to go 8-4 again, but they are going to beat South Carolina.
Yep, they beat South Carolina in my opinion.
all right, and the next game is going to be Mizzou. I'm going to keep it short and simple. I have South Carolina losing.
Losing?
Yep. It's in Columbia. I have South Carolina losing to Mizzou for God knows what reason, but I know that Eli Drinkowitz will pull something out of his bag and just pop South Carolina and Banger.
I see Missouri being a worse team than Vanderbilt, because Missouri.
Ugh.
No, listen to me.
Missouri
lost their quarterback.
Missouri's not going to be worse than Vanderbilt.
But Missouri lost their
Missouri's not going to
quarterback.
be worse than Vanderbilt, but South Carolina will win that
South
game
Carolina's
pretty
not.
comfortably. I think that will be a game that South Carolina fans will look to in 2 seasons, that look back on that game and say that was a big game for us, because I think they win that pretty convincingly.
Yeah, I think South Carolina wins in like 2-3 scores. I don't like Missouri at all this year. Missouri has no. It'd be different if they still had Basilic or like
Yeah.
it'd be a lot different story.
All right. The next game, Vandy in Nashville.
Oh,
South Carolina W blowout.
blowout.
Vandy by about 20.
Vanderbilt
No,
by
I'm
3.
kidding. South Carolina will win
Vanderbilt by
that very
3?
easily.
Ooh, okay.
I will
So
say
the-
this though, that game last year between South Carolina and Vanderbilt should not have been that close.
I blame it on whoever started that game. He was.
Oh yeah,
garbage.
that quarterback was terrible.
All right. So
I think he
we'll
threw
go to
like
the-
3 picks.
We'll
Yeah.
go to the next game, which is really one that I'm wanting to watch this year. It's definitely going to be a fun one to watch. It's going to be Florida versus South Carolina in the swamp.
I think it
So-
should be
Florida,
insane.
Florida's trash. South Carolina win that game by,
as,
I'd say, double digits.
as much
South
respect as I want to give to
Carolina
both
by
teams, as much respect as I want to give to both teams, it's Billy Napier's first year. He has a lot to prove considering he's coming from the Sun Belt. Yes, he is coached under Saban. Yes, he is an offensive-minded head coach. I'm going to be dead honest with you. With Florida, I see South Carolina still in this one off a game-winning field goal.
I got the game being a high scoring game. I got 48-42 South Carolina. I think AR-15 and the offense is going to be explosive, but South Carolina's defense is better. and
Anthony
comes out winning.
Anthony Richardson is not that good.
Whoa.
He's the most overrated quarterback in the SEC.
I agree with that take. But
I
I
beg
still
to
think
differ.
I got Gators by
think-
14.
I got Florida winning that game.
I got
35
South
31.
Carolina on a late game field goal just because of
I can't-
Napier.
I like Napier, but I don't consider him like amazing yet. I really think South Carolina wins this by 10, 7-10.
So
Wait,
the
no,
next-
I already said 49-42. My bad.
All right, so the next game is Tennessee versus South Carolina in
Tennessee's
Columbia.
winning.
Tennessee is winning that game, and this is
I-
not coming from any bias because of what the podcast used to be. It's just coming from the fact that if Hendon Hooker starts a complete season and doesn't get injured, it's going to be literal, just like high scoring fireworks all year long for the Tennessee offense.
Yeah, this might be the one SEC game that I have circled on. I really want to watch that. And I think it's going to be a fantastic game, but I still think Tennessee is the better team. Maybe not the better program, but the better team at this point.
I gotta say, there's always gonna be one team that every coach beats and loses to. I think the team that Beamer will always beat is gonna be Florida, and I think the team that Beamer will always lose to will be Tennessee. I don't see us beating Tennessee. Like,
See, this is my thing. This is my upset of the season for South Carolina. I think South Carolina beats Tennessee. Because
Whoa.
Tennessee, knowing them, they always choke in one game that
They-
is
they choke
totally
late
just
in the
random.
season.
And I think it's gonna be that game.
I was really
they choked late in the season, but I think South Carolina's gonna. I just think Beamer's gonna lose to Tennessee. I just have a feeling.
All right,
about
so
that
the
game.
final game of the season, because I'm not even going to consider it, like as much as I respect South Carolina's program, you're in a heavy SEC and you're not making the SEC championship unless all of Georgia's football team catches corona and goes out for like half the season. So Clemson in Clemson or at Clemson, the real death or the fake Death Valley, my bad. What do y'all feel about that? Because with what I've seen from Clemson last year, and especially the fact that there's no hype going around that team going into this year, this is the game that I have South Carolina finally winning the in-state rivalry.
No, Clemson.
I don't think we win.
Clemson's trending downhill, but South Carolina will not beat Clemson. Clemson has a chance still, even though they're trending down, to make the playoffs. And they play
I
the
don't think they have a
ACC.
chance in the playoffs, only because I think NC State's infinitely better than them.
NC State is better than them, and I think NC State wins the ACC, but Clemson will still be a top 10, top 15 team, and at home, they're just not going to lose to South Carolina.
I think honestly,
will not let that happen.
the game's going to be way closer than people expect. Like, 30 zip last year. And I looked at the record a few weeks ago. South Carolina has a better record away than at home versus Clemson all
Yeah,
time.
and I could see it being a somewhat
But
close
I don't-
game, but I
I
just
don't
don't
think-
think they're gonna win.
I think South Carolina's offense is going to be 10 times better. I mean, Zeb Nolan, I watched that game last year. I actually had really good hopes for that game last year. And you saw Zeb Nolan, you saw Jason Brown, I think that was his name. You saw them both like just get completely dogged on because the offensive line and they just folded under pressure because they were FCS guys.
So that's gonna
Yeah, I think
conclude it.
Clemson's going to win that game, but I think it's going to be like the Trevor Lawrence, Kelly Bryant situation. I think DJ's going to start at the beginning of the season, and I think Cade Klubnik's going to take over at the rest of the season.
All right, so I know we were going to
I agree.
discuss the 23 recruiting class after the schedule, but we kind of got a little carried away with some of those games, and we are definitely on a time constraint. But I will guarantee that the next episode we do will not have a time constraint due to some purchases I have recently made. So thanks everybody for showing up. Feel free to DM the Instagram, the Twitter, or even the YouTube, because this is the first like actual podcast that went up on YouTube. So feel free to leave a comment, DM, and tell us what your predictions are for South Carolina this year. I know y'all heard it from everybody here. Y'all think South Carolina has a chance to go over 500 with a possibility of a 9-win season, and I see that being their ceiling, with their floor possibly being 7, considering they might choke some games away. But that's pretty much all we've got for you this week. We hope you enjoyed the new format. We definitely had fun recording this episode. We thank y'all for listening. So good morning, good afternoon, and good night from the V2 crew.